Hello, everybody, and welcome to our first ever Truly Digital After Dark. After things mentioned, I think there's two or three things to kind of go through over the course of today's show. And while we don't have to really tell you where you guys the exits are, there are a few things to mention on a logistical side of things. So what we'd like to do first and foremost is to get you guys involved and keep the conversation going after the show. If you've signed up of the breakout sessions, the link will be in your email. And if you haven't, then what are you guys waiting for? Email hello@11fs.com and we can sign you guys up straight away. The second thing is that actually we're going to be bringing back the Fintech Insider Bingo, but of course a truly digital version of it. You guys at this stage should have received a bingo card in your email. If you haven't, then hit spam, just make sure you kind of got that. Use this card during the show to make sure that you're in for a chance of winning some awesome prizes. There's going to be a truly digital After Dark beanbag. I mean, what else would you ironic innovators really kind of want out there? Just listen out for the recordings and the items that we go through. Simply click off each of them and make sure that you have a full house. That has to be 16 squares. Then tell us in the YouTube chat. First one to call out that they won the prize wins. Lastly, we want you guys to really get involved and ask questions. We've got some truly awesome guests on the show tonight. Just drop them into the chat on YouTube, and we'll weave them into the show as we go a little bit later on. Before we start, though, the show, we wanted to share some words from our sponsors who are supporting today's event. Let's hear from those guys now.
Hi there. We're delighted today to be sponsoring the 11FS After Dark event. So to introduce who we are, User Testing is a market-leading platform for gaining consumer insights at scale. With over 1.5 million people worldwide on our on-demand global panel, you can get fast feedback within an hour to use at all of your key stages throughout your research, your product build, and your marketing campaigns. We work with some of the most innovative and successful fintechs in the world, helping them build customer empathy through listening to real human insight, which drives next-level customer experience and overall business success. We're delighted today to be offering everyone a free trial of the user testing platform, so please do look at the link in your emails. Feel free to contact me at the email address you can see here, and I'm happy to answer any questions. So enjoy the event, and I look forward to seeing you all in the breakout rooms later on. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Joe Blumedal, strategist at MyTech Systems, and it's really fantastic to be here, although we're virtually, and obviously we're delighted to be continuing our association with 11FS and the Fintech Insider. So who exactly is MyTech? Well, MyTech's a Nasdaq-listed company that builds the most advanced identity verification technologies, and really that is to create certainty in the uncertain world. Personally, I believe we're here to help build trust. Trust in a digital world, a world that's not so easy to do business in, especially if you're not face-to-face. And all of that's about balancing customer experience, risk, and regulation. And if you don't get that right, it does come with some fatal consequences, as we've seen recently. We're looking forward to having deeper conversations today with industry leaders. Many of you are here now, taking part in the first virtual After Dark. So welcome, everybody. Let's get started.
Fantastic. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Fintech Insider After Dark. My name is David Brear, and I'm joined virtually, of course, by my colleague and co-host, Mr. Jason Bates. How's it going, Jay? I mean, it's been a pretty busy week, I have to say, all the way around, isn't it? But what we're trying to do tonight, I mean, it's going to be a really interesting show, I think. This is going to be our first truly digital After Dark. We're going to be taking advantage of our current situation where our audience sadly can't be in front of us tonight. This allows us, though, to make the event fully online and bring you guys a really interesting international set of guests. Speaking of which, the guests tonight, we have Boden, who is the CEO and of UK Challenge Bank Starling. We have Nick Ogden, who is a founder of Clearbank, RTGS, and an abundance of other things that's happening. And we have Maia Bittner, who is the voice of the member at US Challenger Bank Chime. It's going to be a super interesting show. And what we're going to be doing is exploring what being truly digital actually means and what that looks like in financial services, both in terms of the businesses, products, services created, but also the future of the FS workplace. This is something that is changing really dramatically. I mean, by now, you guys, if you know anything about 11FS, you know that we believe that digital financial services is only 1% finished. So we really want to take a look at how far we've come to date, especially recently as the pandemic is sped up so dramatically. But also, is there really so much more left to do? Unfortunately, like other events, sadly, you guys are going to have to supply your own drinks at this stage. But please do join me for a beer, settle in for a fun event, and learn a little bit more about this evening of fintech that we've set out for you guys. So without any further ado, we'd like to reveal our first guest. Joining us tonight, we have the one and only Boden, CEO and founder of Starling Bank.
Hi, David.
Welcome to the show, Anne. How are you doing?
Great, and thank you for welcoming me to the Truly Digital After Dark. Wow. Very sort of innovative process.
Well, I was going to say, it's one of these ones that, I mean, you're no stranger to sort of being truly digital. So, and actually, I mean, for anybody who doesn't know, obviously there's a pretty international audience of this. I mean, you've had quite a illustrious career, both actually in challenges like you are with Starling, but actually incumbent banks as well. So, I mean, what does truly digital mean to you in that sense?
And thank you for saying illustrious rather than saying long. I really appreciate that.
I was going to say awesome, but
illustrious and veteran banker and Boden. Okay. Anyway, yes. Truly digital. if you talk about digital, you're not digital at all. If you have a chief digital officer, you're definitely not digital. It's a bit like those people. It's a bit like if I say I'm going to message you, I'm going to use some sort of instant message tool. The people that are not into new tech will actually say, I'm going to send you an electronic message, just in case they meant run down the post office and post you a mail or something. So talking about digital means that you're not really a digital person. And it's worth giving some context to why, we as the digital banks call ourselves digital. It was actually a dinner a couple of years ago, and a couple of I'm not quite sure if Nick, you were there, but a couple of us were sitting around having dinner talking about new banks. And somebody said, what are we going to call ourselves? Are we going to call ourselves a neobank? Are we going to call ourselves a challenger bank? And we didn't like the word challenger bank. It suggested that we're going to be challenging for an awful long time. And as you know, most of us have won that battle. So digital bank was a compromise. But we don't talk about digital in Starling because everything we do is digital. We don't need to call it out.
And that, I think, is the differentiation, isn't it? Like you say, if everything is digital, then you don't actually need at that stage to define it as digital, isn't it? But Jason, what do you think? It feels like, as you say, there's so many CDOs out there and so many people who are kind of looking at digital strategies, when actually, I think, to Anne's point, everything is digital, and therefore strategy is digital as by means, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we use the term with clients, and I agree with Anne. Like, what startup really talks about agile or about digital? I mean, it's just how you do things. Straight through processing. What a great banking term that is. Like, that's just obvious to how it is. I think how the way we use it with clients is to talk about the difference between digitizing and something that's digital. Because it's really easy to take what's been done before, the passbook, the statement, put that on a phone. You say you've got an app, and now we're digital. Great. Job done. And I think there's been a certain way of doing business in most industries for the last 50 years. Markets have found the optimal business and operating models within certain constraints. But technology has changed those constraints in terms of economics, with near zero cost of distribution and much lower marginal costs, and what you can deliver, sort of intelligent services rather than just accessing some dumb commodity products. So we often talk about, newspapers. They were great, great as a physical thing. Then someone put them on an iPad with a nice page curl, and it was like digital news. It's amazing. And of course, then Facebook and BuzzFeed and everything else comes along, and newspapers crater. Or you sell albums, and you distribute these pieces of plastic or these tapes or whatever, and then you can sell albums on iTunes. But really, who wants to buy 12 tracks, 10 of which you're not going to listen to? Spotify suddenly completely changes that. So I'd love to not use it, but I think it's that so many people mistake this digitizing what came before for digital, and you almost have to kind of help them through no, it's not just what you've done before with a different channel, it's something totally different.
Definitely. I mean, there's going to be CDOs watching this and listening to this right now who are slightly seething, so I'm sure we'll get some good questions on that later on. But all right, let's bring on our second guest, though, because actually, as we bring more people into this, we can answer more questions. It's time to bring our second guest. Please welcome the father of e-commerce himself, and actually, I mean, many other fintechs besides that, including Clearbank and now RTGS. It's Mr. Nick Ogden. How are you doing, Nick?
I'm doing very well, David. Hi, Jason. Hi, Anne. How are you all?
Hi.
Very good. Very busy, I have to say. I mean, you've been creating, digital businesses since you started with WorldPay, right? So, I mean, can you tell us a little bit more about, particularly sort of in the present where you are now with RTGS? Do you think the term truly digital is a part of what you've done, or have you just been building businesses in terms of the sense?
I think it's quite interesting. 26 years ago, none of us were truly digital anything because it hadn't started. And so if you put that into context, that's in our lives a very, very short period of time. I think that, and I remember back having a conversation with Jim Clark, the guy who founded Netscape, for those of you who remember those browsers. And he was sort of saying, an internet year is 3 months because innovation and development was occurring so quickly between about 1995 and 2000. And then we all started to get it. We got high-speed internet or higher speed internet. And, you know, I think the digital revolution, if that's the right word, started to occur then. But if I look at it all, it's really all about how you engage with customers in a different way. We've moved from a situation where we used to transact with businesses within a 30-mile radius to transacting with businesses around the planet easily. You know, tonight we're doing this, you know, this conference, you know, after dark, from different parts of the planet easily, because it is truly digital. And I think one of the things that some of the businesses in financial services have to a degree missed is that it's customer service and the way that you engage with your customers and the way that you can actually communicate with your customers and engage with them with your products and services in a completely different way is the opportunity. And I do agree with you, guys, that I think we're 1% of the way there. But that having been said, the same effect that we had between 1995 and 2000, when, you know, that was the internet super bubble before the first, you know, the dot-com boom and bust era, is we're probably back in that because we're going through a global pandemic. Everybody on the planet, whether they wanted to or not, has been exposed to video and digital technologies over the course of the last 5 months. The way that we work is changing, and I don't think we'll change back. The way that, you know, we are going to build our businesses, direct our businesses, communicate with our teams, and communicate with our customers is as it is now. And that's a massive opportunity. And that is what's becoming truly digital.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, as you say, it's when you start needing different nomenclature around digital to what people have pretended has been these things for a long period of time. And, you know, we'll sort of unpick this a little bit further on. But I mean, I've seen this in big organizations, in big banks, I'm sure you have as well. But, you know, what people say digital is and what the reality of the potential is so far apart, isn't it?
No, it is huge. And, you know, people say, oh, you know, all the opportunities have gone. I mean, you know, in the early days of the internet is, oh, you can't do anything because Microsoft and Google will do it first. That's never really been the case. You know, I think there's more opportunities now as a consequence of the forced change of lifestyle that we're all going through than there have been for a number of years. It's just, you know, having the balls, frankly, to embrace them and try and build a business out of it and make sure, as I said, you know, that the customers you're trying to get access to understand very, very simply and quickly, you know, what you're offering. And then you've got to continue to innovate. You can't just do something and wait.
Sounds good. I mean, let's complete our lineup though before we get too far into this, because I think this might turn into the marathon truly digital event where we just talk like 10 straight hours talking about what we think these things are in terms of where. But let's get, before finally we sort of really get into the debate, let's get Maia Bittner on. So Maia is the amazing work that she's doing over in Chime. I'm not sure. I know obviously we've got a lot of a European audience for this, but for anybody who doesn't know, Chime, a really amazing challenger over in the US, doing really interesting things, both in terms of the customer side of things, but actually from a technological perspective as well. So, I mean, Maia, you guys are really one of the first digital challengers in the US in terms of this wave of change. Tell us a little bit more about your background, because, I mean, we touched on this offline a second ago. I mean, you're an engineer by trade.
Sure. So my background is in engineering. And I think because of that, I'm actually a little bit less enamored with the idea of digital than a lot of people are. You know, computers are not magic. In fact, they're quite dumb. They're almost catastrophically dumb. And so what computers are really good at, right, is they're really good at doing very simple, basic operations, and they will only do exactly what you tell them to do. And the strength really comes from, it's basically free to have them do this nearly an infinite number of times in an infinite number of different types. And so from my perspective, both in my career, so I have an entrepreneurial background starting tech companies, and now at Chime, is really, okay, given that we can do very simple tasks, but a nearly infinite number of them, how do we use that to create better customer experiences? And I think you see that at Chime, right? So we are using this ability to deliver people, our government sent everyone stimulus checks for the current pandemic, and we were able to deliver them 5 days early. using digital means, as well as in the rest of my career. So we did really fun integrations across the world. One of my favorite things I built was I had this subscription jewelry company. And what I built is that you could comment on one of our Instagram photos and you could say #wishlist on that photo. And that piece of jewelry would show up at your door the next week through a bunch of integrations that we built there. And so I think it's like being creative about, Jason was kind of saying this, like digital is not just taking what we have today and bringing it online, but let's be more expansive. Let's imagine new opportunities. Let's imagine new collaborations. We're not just saying, okay, well, we took a bank and because we don't have branches, it's cheaper for us to operate. And so we're not going to charge people fees. It gets more interesting than that.
Yeah. And I mean, all of you from a guest perspective must have bumped into this, actually, and describing what you were wanting to do with Starling to people who are traditional bankers. I mean, like that must have been quite a difficult thing in its first place to get their head around what digital really could be.
Yeah, I think that when I started Starling, it was a question of I'd done a lot of work looking at how the big banks, traditional banks, were going to so-called do digital, and decided that they got the wrong end of the stick somehow. They hadn't addressed the business model changes. They were just doing the digitization, as Jason was saying. It was far more about embracing the possibilities. And when I quit my job to start Starling and started talking to people around the world about building a new business model on new technology, trying to do things in a very different way. When I talked about API-enabled banking, people sort of glazed over, and this was 2014. So we've come a long way since then. We've come a long way where we are using APIs. We have a marketplace at Starling. We're using banking as a service principles to actually free the technology that Starling has and help us to service other industries and other organizations. Trying to explain to people back in 2014 what that was quite a challenge. And most people thought it was too audacious, too ambitious, and the woman is crazy. She's trying to start a bank with all these new things in it. Isn't it difficult enough starting a bank without trying to do something with new technology, a new way of doing business, and a new business model? And some of those conversations are very interesting, as Jason knows.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a difficult one to there. I mean, how do you think, coming to you, Jason, how do you see that sort of shaping out? Because, I mean, the industry is changing so dramatically. Financial services is evolving so quickly. Like, do you think, I mean, is the tone being set outside of industry? Is this something that, the Googles, the Amazons, the Facebooks are kind of resetting what good looks like?
Well, arguably, they've been doing that for many years. I mean, it's not that any of this new technology or any of the cloud-based setup that challenger banks are using is modern, cutting edge. It's been around for 10 or 15 years. If anything, just different industries are evolving at different rates. And so we see media and social networking and commerce, and just banking is just more difficult. It's regulated. It's highly important. People's lives don't take a nosedive if they can't access Twitter for a few minutes. Well, David's might, but but if they can't access their money, that's something very different.
Sure.
But I do find it interesting, that Anne mentioned the bank as a service and the different layers of business. And it's interesting the people we've got on the on the conference, because Nick has almost moved down that layers into the rails and the kind of product engine. Anne's making money at the top with the the customer piece, but also this services you can then let other people build businesses on. And then Maia with Chime, I don't know about your sort of ongoing strategy, but I'm sure there's part of it which is evolving to be an ecosystem player, and that's what fascinates me. I think there's a lot of big banks with very monolithic ivory towers, and yet we're decomposing that into rails, product, service, journeys and ecosystems in different ways.
And I mean, and ultimately that this change really benefits the customers, right? The level of competition now in the market, having Chimes and Starlings and Clearbanks and all of these different players in the space actually fundamentally changes how products and services are being constructed going forward. So, I mean, Maia, have you seen that in the US? I mean, I know definitely, to things that Starling are doing in the UK and different players are doing in the UK, the incumbents are really having to pull their socks up. Very British saying, sorry, Maia. Pull their socks up and actually get involved with, actually delivering innovation and not just talking about it. But I mean, have you guys seen that over in the US?
No, we don't. We don't see the incumbent banks acting quickly. I think, right, they have so many fixed costs that it's hard for them to move quickly here. And so what we see at Chime, right, so most of our customers, they're coming from the big banks in the US. So the Chase, the Wells Fargo, the Bank of America. And we see that, right, because we can look at our data and we see someone signs up, they link a Chase account, they transfer all their money over, and then they close their account. So that's certainly what we see. I see there's so much innovation happening on the fintech side, though. And we see that too, right? And so there's this entire ecosystem of different products that are providing people help with budgeting, with benefits, with gig economy work, with free overdrafts and things like that. And so it's really fun to see. I have this dashboard at Chime that I use, which is just the fastest growing sources of deposits into Chime and the fastest growing places that people are spending their money. And that's often the first place that I'll see some cool new fintech app.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It's all of those little slices that can be sort of taking out, isn't it? But I mean, and there's been a lot of talk lately, obviously, about innovation is great, but profitability is wonderful, right? And actually, I mean, there's been a lot of quite pointed in the media, I think, of where we are in the cycle, and is fintech and is banking really sort of making a dent and making a changes? But it's not just, I think, to your point, Maia, and I'm sure Anne, you'll say this as well. It's not just on the individual organizations that are having impact. It's actually the collective change of actually where consumers' expectations are. I know Chime are doing an amazing amount with customer service over in the US, but really a few challenger banks in the UK, for me, have fundamentally reset what good NPS actually looks like. And actually for those things, the tail of benefit that comes from those is really significant. Anna, I don't know if you have any comments on that.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things going on here. By the way, I was interviewed by a journalist this week, and for the first time ever, I heard the phrase heritage banks. So they're not legacy banks and they're not high street banks, they're heritage banks. So are they going to be in a museum one day? And this was a journalist. Okay, but setting that aside, the new banks, whether you call us digital banks or challenger banks, we have great NPS scores. We are, customers like us. We have, we're delivering new products at great cost and we're high growth. I think the thing about getting the business model right is that you can also be profitable. And at Starling, we are growing. Our customers love us, and we're going to be profitable. And unless you're profitable, you're not sustainable, and you can't stick around. And I think what the heritage banks are saying about the new boys on the block at the moment is that we are not sustainable. We won't be there in a couple of years' time because we'll keep consuming VC money. But I think we've got a difference here coming up. The ones that are going to be profitable, that's going to be able to be in it for the long term and give the heritage banks a run for their money and become as big as them, or the ones that are going to be simply there to fire up enthusiasm, raise everybody's game. But whatever you say, the new fintech banks have raised expectations for consumers. They have pushed down prices, raised expectations, and it's given the big banks enough pressure so they can up their own game. But whatever happened, when we started this back in 2014, nobody expected this big change to happen, and it's really happening now.
I love that. I love heritage banks. That seems like such a subtle diss. I just love it. So
I think there is something interesting there with how the press is portraying what on one hand are banks that have been around for 300 years, on others, organizations that are really part of a global land grab to try and get as many customers as they possibly can internationally, as fast as they can. You know, as far as I'm aware, every sort of bank, challenger bank-like, you know, Revolut player, you know, are making money for every additional customer that they get. But it's just it's getting to scale to covering their operating costs, while at the same time they're just fueling customer acquisition as fast as they possibly can. So it's not like they're trying to stay where they are and just not being profitable. It's like they're spending their profits on, you know, on this land grab, because they understand that actually the market's changing, and if you can get to a scale bigger than anyone else, you know, you suddenly get into oligopoly level, you know, status, rather than trying to make sure that you can prove that you're profitable this year. And I think there's something different there about steady state organizations and fast growing startups.
Definitely.
Yeah, you know, what's going on at the moment. You have a huge number of journalists and commentators following what's going on in the industry, and that's good. All our business models are having scrutiny. All our plans are having scrutiny. We have airtime to talk about how we think the world's going to change, and in many cases we're winning. And this is great for consumers. It's great for inclusion, and I think it's raising everybody's game.
Definitely. Do you know, I was joking in our Slack group for 11FS today that we should go back to like 1806 or whatever it is and do a headline from when HSBC was created and how this scrappy, you know, organization will never catch on and never do anything, you know. So and like I say, you know, 4 years into a cycle of real significant change, then actually I think we're far ahead of where anybody's expectations would have been in terms of the impact of those things. But and obviously, I mean, from Chime and Starling's bank's perspective, you know, actually from a customer choosing other organizations to go. But I mean, Nick, this is not a revolution that's just happening with B2C. This is a B2B revolution as well, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I mean, it's just to go back to one of the points Anne was making. I remember back in 2014 having a meeting with the PRA and being asked a question, where are you going to build this new bank, Nick? And I just looked at them and said, well, obviously we're building it in the cloud. And they looked out of the window and it was, you know, cloud technology, but they just, you know, where is it, you know? And it just wasn't thought about. And it's interesting that, you know, we're now, you know, that was, you know, in a cloud. We're now, I guess, in a bit of a vacuum, none of us using offices. But where we are with the stuff that we're doing is we're doing bank-to-bank stuff with RTGS. I mean, Clearbank was set up, as you know, to be a bank to the banks, and is successful at doing that and delivering banking as a service. And the platform out now with RTGS Global delivers, you know, high-speed interbank transactions. You know, we're moving money between New York and Sydney, Australia in 50 milliseconds using atomic settlement. We're working to redefine the rules that deal with the capital treatments of what were regarded as Nostro Vostro were invented back out of times, older than SBC Bank. And there's massive opportunities to use these technologies. And some of the technologies, for example, that we're using didn't exist 2 years ago. And so with that and the change, you can develop new markets in relation to bank, business to bank, consumer to consumer. And the pandemic change that we're going through has just accelerated all of that. I think one interesting thing is going to be how the regulators get round coming to visit you when you're not actually in the office.
That is going to be interesting. You're going to get a knock on your door wherever you are in the world, aren't you, at that point? I mean, do you think though? I mean, you
said, because, you know, as Anne will know, and you know, when we went through building a bank, there's certain things that are expected of you that they are right in a truly digital connected customer centric world didn't really seem to matter. They were what were expected because the other big banks had been doing that for years, therefore that seemed to work, so you had to follow it.
Nick,
And
this
it would
is
be
really
very,
exciting.
very interesting if back when the whole,
Go on,
I'm
sorry,
just
Maia.
thinking-
it would have been really when the change. Sorry.
Oh, I'm
Go
just
on, Maia.
thinking that I've never thought of this impact before, that if we're not in offices, maybe this pandemic will be the push that regulators need to understand the way that modern financial companies do business. And I've just gone through, so many crazy things from the regulators. They were worried about, we had to have a paper visitor log for our visitors to come sign in. And it felt less efficient, less secure. And that if now that we don't have offices, maybe it'll just be a kick in the pants so that the regulators come to the 21st century.
You say that until one turns up at your apartment, Maia, right? At that stage, it's just taking it to a whole different level, isn't it? But I think the regulators globally have played such a big part in the change that we've set up. But Anne, I know you've had a lot of conversations with those guys, both the PRA and the FCA, when kicking off Starling. So how much have they played a part in really what you've managed to establish?
Yeah, well, I'm very grateful that the UK environment led to Starling and lots of other banks. Back in 2013, if they hadn't come out with a new way of getting bank authorization, we wouldn't have London and the UK being the center of this new bank explosion, really. It's been really, really successful. And yeah, the regulator has asked us some very, very difficult questions, and they have been keeping us on our toes for the last good. We're a bank. We take people's deposits, and those deposits guaranteed by the Financial Services Compensation Scheme, and people rely upon us. We have millions of customers that rely upon us. It is good that the regulations are high, and we are very, very grateful that we've been given the opportunity to come to market in the last few years. The question we have is, will the UK remain the centre of financial services innovation? We have been pushed in the right direction because of Payment Services Directive 1 and 2. We have been pushed in the right direction because of the Competition and Markets Authority wanting new entrants into the space. And that is why the UK is at the center of the fintech revolution, because a regulator has responded to these things. If we're not part of Europe, will we have the next wave of fintech evolution? I think we're at the start of something really interesting. The new banks have built the infrastructure, and it's taken Starling a long time to build this really, really solid infrastructure where we can support our own customers, other banks' customers, and do exciting things. But the platform's there now, and the next interesting thing is, what are we going to build on it? What are we going to let other businesses create on our platform? What are we going to let customers do? And I hate to say it, but I have to use your phrase. Digital is 1% done, or whatever it is, because I believe that digital banking is only 1% done. It's a huge amount to come, and the exciting bit is to come. We've done the regulation, we've built the infrastructure, we got the basics in place. Now the exciting stuff comes.
Definitely. But we can't really talk about regulators without having Maia comment, because boy, in terms of state, federal, national, I remember talking to to the founders of Simple and Movin', way back in the day, about the just sheer difficulties of doing anything. Good God, you've got ACH and check use off the scale. How do you manage that in the US?
Well, I do think that the most archaic part of the US banking system is personal checkbooks, which Chime does not offer because we're trying to move us into the 21st century. We are almost forced to have a mail a check feature because you really have to be able to send a check to people to participate in the United States, unfortunately. So we do have that. We've gotten rid of checks. The regulation is intense. And my last company, Pinch, we became licensed money transmitters, which is a very difficult regulatory step. We only did it in a couple states because it's a state by state regulation. And we have 50 states. It's so many states. I don't think people understand how many states there are. And today, like one of our, so many Americans are unemployed at the moment because of the pandemic. And so they're receiving unemployment, which also comes from the state. And so we're not only working with the regulators on a state and federal level, but we're also working with 50 unemployment offices to make sure that that integration is top notch and that we can help them process their payments as quickly as possible. And we're working. So I think the US, the financial ecosystem is entirely different. I think the regulatory hurdles, frankly, some of our European challengers are underestimating, and it creates a moat for us since we were sort of born in this environment and created with regulation in mind at the start.
I mean, it's a difficult thing, isn't it? Like, say, in terms of that high bar for it, it does create an interesting opportunity, doesn't it? As you say, with latter sort of people coming in. But all right, guys, I mean, I think we could talk about this for forever. I think we all agree, though, that actually the industry is in a more exciting place than it ever has been. And to your point, the things that we can do in this industry now is changing so dramatically, and ultimately the customers really sort of benefit from this. But we want to kind of turn it over to you guys now, though. There's some been really interesting questions that have kind of come through. Starting actually, so one from Martin Ing, who has lockdown actually helped move customers to new banks? So, I mean, Maia, Anne, I mean, have you guys kind of seen, look, people, the kind of safety net of, could you just walk into your branch and talk to somebody about that? Obviously doesn't exist in a COVID environment. So, I mean, have you guys seen a kind of an increase in applications during this period? Maybe Anne, starting with you.
Yeah, yes, we have, especially business accounts, because businesses, needed appointments at heritage banks to open an account. And of course, they could do it at home during lockdown with us. Our business has seen increased account openings throughout the process. And of course, we have been highly involved in providing lending to many of our SME businesses. And tens of thousands of businesses have benefited from bounce back loans. We have done a billion worth of government backed lending. And we were able to do that in a lockdown where, everybody was working from home. Within weeks, we had a connected card out there, which was recommended by NHS volunteers for people that were self-isolating. We implemented check imaging. We implemented bounce back loans. So we have been very, very busy and very, very effective during the lockdown. It hasn't impacted our productivity. And that's because we were built for the cloud. Everything just works, and our customers loved it.
Very good. Maia, what do you think? I mean, has this period actually perversely been a real eye-opener to customers of incumbent organizations who couldn't do everything that they needed in this period, but could through Chime?
Yeah, it's been crazy for us. And even as a digital bank, we're still trying to make sure that we fully enable banking at home, right? So we're a digital bank, but it doesn't mean we don't have a retail presence. Like, you can use ATMs, people are using their cards at stores. We wanted to make sure that people could live their whole financial lives within the walls of their house, since that's what they're doing. But yeah, signups have been crazy. Historically, we've really appealed to this very digital millennial, this person who lives on their phone. They never wanted to go to a bank branch in the first place. And we're easy, you can deposit checks on your phone, you get the notifications, your whole financial life lives on your phone. That's been our core customer. Now we see that expanding to a bunch of people who, they wouldn't mind going into a bank branch. But now that there aren't any bank branches to go to, they see the advantages that we offer. They see the no fees. They see that they're getting their paycheck faster, all these great features. And so business has been great for us.
It does feel, I mean, Nick, even into the B2B sense, actually, a lot of what has happened in COVID has really shone a light, I think. it's the emperor's new clothes, isn't it? I think a lot of organizations have realized that the investments they've been making in technology have not necessarily been right, and maybe there's a need for a significant change. So I mean, have you guys, I mean, I know with RTGS you guys have had a pretty significant amount of inquiries about what you've been doing, but has that been picking up over the breakdown period?
Yes, it has. I mean, I think too, David, in relation to the consumer challenge, cash is exiting, and so that they're transactionally positioned to really gain from that, and so that growth should stay there. In relation to what we've been seeing is that there's a whole recognition now that we have to transact in a different way, and that, believe it or not, the world works 24/7 by 365. And customers actually understand that their money is in a bank, but they actually should be empowered to use it. So we've been in discussions with many banks and with many regulators, as you know, for a bit of time. We've got quite a significant announcement, which we'll get to read about during the course of next week, I hope, to invest in distribution of our core technologies. And we've got about, I think, 43,000 banks around the world who we've got teed up in our pipeline at the moment. So the last few months have been interesting for us, and continue to be. I think the other fascinating thing is that, I used to live on an aeroplane, and, spend months just flying around the planet. I haven't done that. And yet we still had all the meetings. In fact, we probably had more meetings, and those meetings have been easier to arrange with far more participants than on a flight and going to Sydney for 2 days. So I think it's all changed for the better.
It is interesting. I mean, how do you guys, as a panel, how do you feel about, I mean, the future of work more broadly at that stage? Because I mean, I personally, I mean, I live in for the international guys, tiny little East Coast city in England called Norwich. Never go there for any reason like other than somebody said you should do at that stage. But from my perspective, having not left Norwich for 3 months now, I'm running the business in the exact same way we did before. I'm sure, Anne, you found the same. I'm sure, Maia, from your apartment, it feels like the future of work is very, very different because of COVID.
This is working, right? This is working for lots of organizations like ourselves. Digital businesses, e-commerce businesses, doing things remotely, working from home is very, very successful. And that's how we've seen this crisis. Those businesses, those small businesses that we serve that can work from home, that have e-commerce distribution, are finding it very, very successful, and they're doing even better than before the crisis. But those in hospitality, where they face-to-face retail, are really suffering. And what we have here is we've moved towards digital, right? And we've actually made probably 20 years gain in 6 months. People have learned to do things differently, and it will be it'll impact cash transactions, it'll impact face-to-face commerce, it'll impact the high street. And as responsible business people, we have to be prepared to help out those businesses that will have to change for this new environment. Yep, digital is here to come. E-commerce is here to come. Doing things from home is here. It's not going to. It has happened far quicker than we ever thought. But we have to be sympathetic and empathetic for those businesses that will not be able to make the change.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, Jason, what do you think? I mean, I miss you when I don't get to hang out with you in person, but like, is this going to be a purely digital relationship going forward, or are we going to hang out in person at some point?
Well, I agree with Anne. I mean, the digital shift has been accelerated by this new shift, this geographical COVID shift. I saw the Bank of England making comments about there being some structural change to the economy. And a friend was recently trying to convince me that rather than a V-shaped recovery or a W-shaped recovery, we were in a K-shaped recovery. Some of these businesses are going like this. Some are dropping off. And it is this future of very different outcomes. If you're selling bikes or gym equipment or art equipment or home networking or office desks, you're doing phenomenally well. If you're in the restaurant, pub, cinema, theatre business, or you're an artist or a musical performer, you're in real trouble. And so I think the future is really going to be described by a number of shifts that happen simultaneously. We've got this climate shift, we've got a cultural revolution, that we've seen around civil rights in the US. We've got the digital shift happening, and all of this rapid, consistent change that are overlapping each other. What happens to office space in London? Apparently, there are 25 people who are employed for every one knowledge worker in and around London. The personal trainer, the hairdresser, they're all in trouble. So I think that we've got some periods of significant societal change happening, of which some people are going to do phenomenally well, and we're going to have to protect and look after a large set of people who are not going to do so well.
It is going to really, like you say, exacerbate that separation between those two things, isn't it? And I think to Anne's point, and I think to everybody on the panel's perspective as well, it's actually in startup and in fintech more broadly, we operate in dog years at the slowest, and COVID has really accelerated that, if nothing anything else. But what do you think then, Nick? Do you think this is going to cause not just for the startups, but do you think for the incumbents, this is going to create a kind of a tidal wave of requirement for change? Because essentially, if you've been investing in digitizing your way to oblivion, then the ability to really see what is coming in terms of the changes that are there and the necessary changes from an infrastructural and from an architectural perspective. I mean, much of what Anne is talking about is because it's the way in which Starling do it and shining that on anything that they want to do. Nick, do you think this is going to cause a kind of a revolution in the back office for big incumbent banks?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's one very big European bank that I was talking to yesterday, and they are expecting they will all continue to work at home until the early part of next year. And that's one of the massive banks in the world. So they've got to change. They've got their branch infrastructure and all the rest of it, which is probably not operating. They've got to change and adapt. So I think the opportunities for some of the agile, challenger bank, the digitally aware banks, is to get in there and work with those organizations and help them. And as Anne would no doubt do, go and market there as quickly as she can.
Yeah, I mean, those who get customers win. And I think that's always the thing. And it's great to see, I mean, Nick, your organizations, Anne, your organizations, Maia, your organizations, the people who gain customers essentially win in this market. So congratulations for all of the things that you're doing. For the sake of the bingo right now, digital native business, fintech innovation, business pivots, cashless, contactless payments.
AI.
I really disappoint us that. I mean, it's starting to feel like some sort of magic quadrant that should be created out of these things, but remote access data and AI, go nuts, guys. All right, guys, that wraps up, I'm afraid. And I feel like, again, we probably could go for hours on this subject matter, and particularly with these guests as well. But that wraps up the very first truly digital Fintech Insider After Dark. So thank you so much for joining us wherever you are. Please help us carry on this conversation. Some really interesting points that the guests have been making. Come and join us on one of those breakout areas. But thank you so much to our guests. Where can people find out a little bit more about you and the great work that is happening? Anne, tell us where they can find out more about you and find out more about Starling.
Yeah, you find us at starlingbank.com. Come and look at what we offer.
Yeah, it's very easy. Just go to rtgs.com or rtgs.global and find us, or LinkedIn, or David.
really, really funny, as well as being really, really impactful in terms of the things that she's doing. But Maia, where can people find out a little bit more about you and the great stuff you're doing at Chime?
So clearly chime.com, but honestly, I really recommend our Instagram. It's at instagram.com/chime, and it is extremely great. It makes me laugh every day.
And Mr. Bates, where can people find out more about you?
You can find us building banks around the world at 11fs.com.
Very good. I feel the need to go and buy that domain instantly just to make sure. As for me, you can find me at David Brear over on Twitter. The viewer Yo Chill just won the bingo, so congratulations to you. We'll be getting that out to you as we speak. Thank you to our media and marketing team for putting on this event today. We genuinely couldn't have done this without you guys, so thank you so much. Stay up to date with all of the content from 11FS and from Fintech Insiders at 11FS or at Fintech Insiders over on Twitter, and we hope to welcome you back for more events in the future, either remotely or eventually in person, hopefully as well. Thanks again, guys. Speak to you later.
Bye.